In the past half-year, Elena finally got used to the smell of disinfectant in the ward and no longer subconsciously retched. She pushed the door open and walked in. Her daughter Sarah was half lying on the hospital bed, holding a book with the hand receiving the 4 drip, and flipping through the pages with the other hand. Son-in-law Wyatt sat beside her, peeling an apple with a hand-cranked peeler. After 7 or 8 seconds, he placed the well-peeled apple on a plate and pressed down with a fruit cutter, neatly slicing it into 6 pieces. The trash can under the bed was full, used tissues were scattered on the floor, and several coats were tangled and placed haphazardly on a chair, in a disorganized manner. Unable to bear it any longer, Elena grumbled as she began to tidy up the ward, folding clothes, rolling up curtains, and arranging pillows. She noticed the wonton in the meal box had not been eaten much, lacking some soup. Frowning, she used chopsticks to finish it, secured the knot, and threw it into the trash can. When she returned, she sat down next to the bed, sensing that something was still not right. Standing up, she took the book from her daughter's hand, saying, "Apart from resting, don't do anything else. What's the use of reading this broken book? It's a waste of energy." Tired of the daily nagging, Sarah shifted her body and crawled under the covers. The bedside table was packed, and Elena lost the desire to organize it. She simply stuffed the book inside, slammed the cabinet door shut with a bang, and remarked, "Every day he finishes work so early, doesn't pick up the child, and comes to the hospital without even tidying up. Sitting there motionless for half the day, anyone would think he's the patient." "What are you saying, Mom?" "Wyatt has been busy with a project these days. He rushes to the hospital right after work without even changing his clothes. He just entered the ward, following you." Sarah lifted the blanket, sitting up abruptly. "Don't move around. Don't you know you're still on N4? I just complained a bit. Is there anything wrong with criticizing him? Whether he's good or not, you know in your heart. Out of line. Get sick and suddenly think you're a generation older? Take off that hat for me. With such good heating, why wear a wool hat? Aren't you afraid of heat rashes?" She said as she yanked off the hat, and the rest of her words got stuck in her throat. Her daughter's hair, all shaved off, not a single strand left. Next to them, there was a little girl on the adjacent bed, 8 years old. She had been slouching with her legs hanging off the bed, counting on her fingers. Seeing the situation, she quickly jumped down from the bed, reaching out to Sarah, shouting that she wanted to compare with Auntie whose head was smoother. Wyatt sensed the tension in the atmosphere, bent down to retrieve the trash can from under the bed, and said he would go empty it, tactfully leaving the hospital room. After her husband closed the door to the ward, Sarah comforted her mother, pulling her to sit by the bed, and used a lollipop to appease the little girl. She took the hat, put it back on her head, thinking about how to respond to her mother. The decision to cut her hair was impulsive. Even if she didn't go for a completely bald look, having patches of hair missing here and there would still affect her appearance. Still unsure of how to reply, a nurse suddenly appeared, breaking the brief deadlock. "Bed 2149, chemotherapy is scheduled for next Monday." "I know, thank you," Sarah politely greeted the nurse, then turned to her mother with a smile. "Mom, buy me a wig. I don't want to wear a hat all the time." Elena said, "Okay," and slowly stood up, leaning on the bedside. She walked out of the ward, leaning against the doorframe, watching the comings and goings of patients, feeling exhausted. Hospitals were hospitals after all, and looking around, there was no shortage of sorrow, but joy was hard to find. It was strange. Raising her daughter alone for so many years didn't feel tiring, working 3 jobs in a day didn't feel tiring, and even when running around to avoid her husband's creditors, she didn't feel tired. But now, in retirement, with nothing major to do except take care of her daughter's family, she often felt overwhelmingly fatigued. Her relationship with her daughter was average, unlike other mother-daughter pairs with everyday warmth and occasional squabbles. They were the opposite. Shouting at each other was the norm, and having a quiet meal became a rare occurrence. The most intense argument was after her daughter graduated from college. Sarah brought a guy home, introducing him at the dinner table as just a regular friend and asked her mother not to think too much. There was no need to think too much, just a glance at the two exchanging flirtatious glances, and Elena had 3 or 4 thoughts in her mind. Nevertheless, it didn't matter. The guy seemed honest, treated her daughter well, so she let them be. Unexpectedly, after some days, Sarah packed her bags, saying she was going to the northern city with that guy. It was the early 2000s, not a convenient era for transportation. Elena felt like her brain was missing a few square centimeters, grabbed a broom and started hitting, and after hitting wasn't enough, she locked the door, moved a blanket, sat at the bedroom door, guarding night after night. But she couldn't guard against her daughter climbing through the window upstairs. Then Elena remembered that they lived on the top floor. From then on, no news for a week. Then for a long time, it was Sarah calling to report she was safe. The moment Elena heard her daughter was still alive and well, she quickly hung up the phone, giving no time for small talk. The standoff lasted for 2 years. "Mom, Wyatt and I are getting married. Will you come?" "Go where?" "Not going." After saying that, she forcefully hung up the phone, but immediately regretted it. Changing into proper clothes, she went to relatives' homes, indirectly asking the other party about the time and location of her daughter's wedding, without telling them she was coming. Later, she hurried to the train station, asking staff to buy a recent train ticket. She still arrived late on the wedding day. To save money, Elena stayed at a small hotel far from the venue. Although she left the hotel early, she didn't anticipate its huge size and the resulting traffic congestion. Changing several taxis in a row, when she finally arrived at the destination, it was already past noon. According to customs, weddings should be concluded before noon. Thinking that the wedding should have ended by now, she turned her head and saw her daughter. Her daughter in a wedding dress, shining brilliantly, and that light penetrated her heart. She couldn't help but shed tears, gripping her daughter's hand. Blood is thicker than water after all, and there's no need to speak. Everything they wanted to say was written in the gaze they exchanged with each other. So she thought, forget it, let it go, as long as her daughter is happy. "You and your daughter have a low bone marrow match." Elena received the text message just as she was waking up from her nap. The sunlight poured in from outside, shattered on the quilt, melted along the bedside, creating a soft glow. She turned her head to look outside, observing the old, peeling security net on the window, where 2 sparrows were shivering. She wanted to let the sparrows in, but as soon as she opened the window, they fluttered away. This house was rented by her daughter. They could have chosen a more expensive and better community, but Elena refused. She disliked those locations being too noisy, so she carefully selected a quiet and less populated place. She had been living here for some time. At that time, her daughter was pregnant, and Wyatt's parents were unable to come as they had to manage their business back in their hometown. Elena had just retired, so it seemed natural for her to settle in this city. For Wyatt's career, Sarah didn't get pregnant until her 30s, making her an older mother in various senses. Moreover, she rarely exercised, making the situation even more challenging. She had been taking pregnancy pills since confirming the pregnancy, and during the time of delivery, the pain was so severe that she couldn't get out of bed. Elena decided to bring some personal belongings and stay at the hospital. Her sleep quality was already poor, and taking care of her daughter made her stay awake all night. Later, when things calmed down, she realized that her temperament had improved a lot because of this. Having a better temper was a good thing, but the process was too painful. She swore not to endure such suffering again, but not even 10 years had passed, and it seemed like she had turned the hospital into her home again. The bus ticket is 2 yuan. Move to the back after getting on the bus. Don't push. There are plenty of seats in the back. The bus driver stood up from his seat, urging passengers to board quickly. When Elena reached for her pocket, she realized she had forgotten her bus card. She hastily opened the inner pocket of her clothes, took out her wallet, only to find no change, only a 10 yuan bill. More people were joining the queue behind her, and seeing the person in front not moving, they began to shout. The louder the commotion, the more anxious she became. She didn't know what to do for a moment, so she turned around, wanting to walk down from the bus. "Sister, let me pay for you." Beside her, a young girl smiled at her and casually put 4 yuan into the coin box. The queue started to move, and before Elena could thank the girl, she got scattered in the crowd. The young girl was 5 or 6 people away from her. She wasn't sure if they were heading to the same destination, and she didn't know if more people would get on at the next few stops. All she could do at this moment was slowly navigate through the crowd. "Sister, do you have any change? I'll give you the 2 yuan back." When she squeezed next to the girl, she handed over 10 yuan. "No need, sister." The young girl waved her hand to refuse but couldn't resist the insistence, so she took it and handed 8 yuan back to Elena. "Sister, where are you going?" "Shinmin Elementary School." After a few pleasantries, Elena couldn't help blushing as the girl kept addressing her as sister. She turned her head to the window, facing her reflection, adjusted her collar, and then raised her hand to tuck the strands of hair behind her ear. Suddenly, she felt she was being too affected, so she put her arm down and tightly grabbed the back of the seat. She wondered if she wore too bright clothes today, making the girl misunderstand her age. She decided not to dress like this again in the future. They were elderly people, and wearing such flashy clothes was too improper. The next stop is Shinmin Elementary School. Passengers getting off, please move to the back door in advance. Hearing the announcement, she held onto the handrail and slowly moved towards the back door amid the crowd. Shinmin Elementary School had just finished its classes, and when the gate opened, parents who came to pick up their children rushed forward. Not knowing who stepped on whose foot, a string of curses rang out one after another. Elena thought of where she was at the school gate and couldn't be too embarrassing. So the cursing didn't last long. Alice came out of the school at this moment, wearing a small pink hat and carrying a small backpack, running towards them. Elena pulled her granddaughter, creating a gap between people, and finally reached a less crowded open space. Standing there, she took a moment to catch her breath. Alice, being a child with boundless energy, didn't feel tired at all. Instead, she seemed eager to play again. After exchanging greetings with passing friends, she suddenly remembered something. Tugging at her grandma's clothes, she pulled her closer and, standing on tiptoes, asked, "Grandma, can I see the pretty sister again today?" "What pretty sister?" Elena didn't understand what her granddaughter was talking about. "Dad brought the pretty sister home secretly last night. He thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I saw everything through the door crack." Elena stood in place for a while, watching the gradually thinning crowd, before snapping back to reality. She decided it was time to head home. "Grandma, you're going the wrong way. This isn't the way home. I'm not going to your house today, we're going to Grandma's house." Holding her granddaughter's hand tightly, she walked towards the bus stop. Wyatt bought Sarah a bright red wig, making her look like a woman from the lively and colorful streets. Because of this wig, Elena couldn't help but make sarcastic remarks. "Mom, why do you always have issues with Wyatt? He's been good these days and hasn't done anything to upset you," Sarah intervened, defending her husband. "What issues do I have? Have I said anything about him? I come to the hospital every day to take care of you. It's already tiring enough, and I'm not allowed to complain a bit?" Elena retorted. "Who asked you to take care of me? If you don't want to come, then don't. It's not like I'm disabled. What can't I do?" Sarah retorted, still not looking at her mother, absorbed in poking around on her phone. "My daughter is in elementary school now. Do you still know how to speak? If it weren't for me giving birth to you, would I exhaust myself taking care of you? There are so many people coming and going on the street. Why don't I go take care of them? Do I not have a conscience saying this?" Elena finished this rant in one breath, then sat abruptly on a chair, crossed her legs, and folded her hands across her chest, signaling the end of that topic. During the argument between the mother and daughter, Wyatt remained silent, calmly staying by the side. He poured water for his wife, looked up at the 4 drip, and silently counted the drops per minute. He was generally reserved and not inclined to speak much, except for casual conversations with his wife or handling endless company affairs, as if there were nothing he particularly liked in life. During this squabble between mother and daughter, Wyatt didn't intervene. He quietly stayed on the side, offering water to his wife, observing the 4 drip, and mentally noting the drops per minute. He was generally a mild-mannered person, not inclined to speak much in daily life, except when chatting with his wife or dealing with endless business matters. It seemed like there was nothing specific in life that he particularly enjoyed. "I'm going to the supermarket. Is there anything you two need to buy?" Elena stood up, exchanged a few words with the couple, then left the hospital room. She closed the door and looked inside through the window. Honestly, Wyatt hadn't changed much since she first met him. He still had those black eyes and the calm expression that only slightly brightened when he looked at Sarah. If they hadn't jointly left their hometown back then, she might have approved of this young man. Although their life was fulfilling, there was still a knot in her heart. Even now, during nights, she would have nightmares. Sometimes, she dreamed that something bad happened to her daughter, and she would wake up sweating profusely, finding it difficult to fall back asleep. The lingering fear on her heart couldn't be easily explained in just a few words. She withdrew her gaze from the couple and walked towards the hospital exit. Passing by the chemotherapy room, she ran into someone she knew, the mother of the little girl in the adjacent bed to her daughter. The woman wasn't a local. She came to this city to work, dressed plainly, and worked outside every day to earn money. She often left her daughter alone, sometimes chatting with other patients or singing children's songs with the nurses. As for her husband and the financial aspects of the treatment, she didn't say, and Elena didn't ask. Each family had its own difficulties, and saying more wouldn't be helpful. "Auntie, going out?" She had been sitting on a bench outside the chemotherapy room, and when she saw Elena approaching, she stood up to greet her. Elena nodded and asked if the woman's daughter had finished chemotherapy. "It just finished. She fell asleep, and the doctor is watching inside for me." I really..." The woman's eyes turned red as she spoke. She had endured for most of the time inside, and now she couldn't hold back any longer. She cried so much inside, it broke my heart. "I don't know what to do." Elena comforted her, helping her sit down. "Don't be too anxious. Isn't your daughter the same as mine? Both are in the early stages. The doctor said that as long as it's detected early, it's not difficult to cure. But Auntie, I understand the reasoning. It's just that the process is too agonizing. I really can't get through it." "Relax, it will get better after some time." The woman stopped crying, tightly clenched the tissue that had wiped away her tears, then released it and sighed. "Auntie, I'm a person with a small mind. I get scared for a long time when I encounter anything. If only I were like you, not caring about anything, just eating and drinking, having playful banter with my daughter, and doing whatever I want." Upon hearing this, Elena's hand, which was patting the woman's shoulder, paused. She turned her head, avoiding the gaze that was coming her way. "It's okay, relax. It will definitely get better. I need to go to the supermarket now, so I won't bother you." The supermarket was on the 2 streets across from the hospital, and Elena walked there. Today was the weekend, and there were quite a few people shopping. The shelves were filled with new products. As she pushed her shopping cart through, she thought about what vegetables to buy for making soup at home. Sarah already had a small appetite, and now with chemotherapy approaching, although she seemed not anxious on the surface, she was a bit uncomfortable inside, so she ate even less. In any case, dinner would still be mostly light. Adding a bit more seasoning might stimulate her daughter's appetite. Standing in front of the shelves, facing a myriad of new seasonings, Elena felt at a loss. Nowadays, people even pursue trends in their meals. All the cooking items were foreign brands with labels in a language she couldn't understand. Next to it was a shelf selling cosmetics. Elena pushed her cart over, walked to the back, and saw a row of wigs. There were wigs in various styles. After looking for a while, with the guidance of a sales assistant, she chose a conservative yet delicate short wig. However, when she took it down from the shelf, the feel in her hands wasn't right. The wig's texture was too sticky, as if some glue hadn't dried yet, so she had to put it back. She went to the checkout counter. After the cashier scanned all the items in the shopping cart, she asked, "Alipay or WeChat?" Elena hesitated for a moment, then realized and handed over the cash. "Cash, I'll use cash." "Sorry, we don't support cash payments anymore. You can only use mobile payments." "What? A few days ago, I could still pay with cash when I came here. The supermarket made adjustments these past few days. Mobile payments and cash payments are in separate lanes. If you're using cash, you need to go to the lane on the other side," the cashier explained, looking expressionless at the next person in line. "Next, please hurry up, don't block the aisle." "I'm sorry, I'll leave right away." She apologized repeatedly, nervously putting back the items she had taken out. As she retreated holding the cart handle, she didn't see the little boy behind the cart and accidentally stepped on his foot. The little boy cried out loud from the pain. Elena, flustered by the crying, couldn't react for a moment. In her haste, she turned the cart abruptly, and the edge of the cart got stuck in the middle of the barrier and couldn't be pulled out. "Ma'am, could you be a bit faster? I'm in a hurry to meet someone." This was a straightforward complaint. "Why are you dawdling here? You're old, and your eyesight isn't good anymore? Can't you see this is the mobile payment lane?" This was a muttered remark. "Honey, don't rush me. I could have paid quickly, but I was blocked here by someone." This was said while making a phone call. As more and more people lined up behind, everyone's attention seemed to converge on her. The crowd was restless, pushing forward and backward, jostling each other discontentedly. Legs shook involuntarily, complaints arose due to nicotine cravings, and the air was filled with the scent of cheap perfume. The store attendant took advantage of the crowd, loudly announcing discounts on vegetables. What else? There was much more. Those tiny details that usually went unnoticed were magnified at this moment. It was like a surging flood, sinking mud, and collapsing snow-covered mountains, helpless, until breathing became difficult. Elena's cheeks burned. She forcefully pulled her shopping cart out of the barrier, but the momentum made it hard to control. It collided with the opposite barrier, and her body tilted. Along with the shopping cart, she fell to the ground. Items spilled out, including those carefully chosen after much contemplation, and those that would still need to be paid for even if they got dirty. "Can't you wait a moment, elderly people? Did I deliberately block the way?" She couldn't hold back. Do young people nowadays all bully the elderly? What's with this separation between mobile payment and cash? Can't they be combined? Someone exclaimed. And your spices? There are hardly any domestically produced ones, they're all imported from abroad. There isn't even an explanatory label. Can you understand it? Can we, the elderly, understand it? If you want to sell something, do it properly. Why bring out poorly made things for sale? My daughter is waiting for me to go back and cook. If I'm late, what will happen if she goes hungry? She already has a small appetite, and now she's sick. What will happen if she doesn't eat on time? What should I do? Elena tried to control her emotions, but she couldn't. She pounded the floor with both hands, tears and mucus streaming down. Holding onto the barrier, she tried to stand up, but her strength didn't allow it. In a daze, she fell back to the ground. When she looked around pleadingly, she suddenly realized that no one was coming to help her. They were all holding their phones, recording and snapping pictures. What were they filming? Who were they sending the footage to, and where? In an instant, she was plunged into an inexplicable fear. Chemotherapy is over. Sarah lies in bed, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. Every inch of her body feels like it's being pricked by needles, excruciatingly painful. She doesn't dare to move. Already slender, the chemotherapy has made her complexion even paler. The sound of needles dropping can be heard in the ward. No one makes a sound, it seems to be an unspoken agreement. On the day following the end of chemotherapy for fellow patients, everyone maintains silence. Elena stays by her daughter's bedside, watching the semi-conscious Sarah. Unable to sit still, she gets up and goes to the nurse's station. After receiving a negative response regarding pain relief medication, Elena still refuses to go back. Instead, she inquires about any medication that can improve Sarah's appetite. The nurse, dealing with numerous patients, offers some comforting words and, after a brief remark about normal reactions, proceeds to administer intravenous fluids to other patients. Returning to the ward, Elena glances at her daughter's chapped lips. She retrieves a cotton swab from the cabinet, moistens it with recently collected warm water, and gently wipes Sarah's lips 2 or 3 times. Discarding the cotton swab, she finds herself unable to sit still on the chair. Picking up the basin, she heads to the bathroom to clean it. The basin contains Sarah's recent vomit. Turning on the tap, she rinses it a couple of times before picking up a brush. Before she can start cleaning, Wyatt calls her. Sarah vomits again, yellow liquid. It's unclear what she's throwing up, given that she hasn't eaten anything for most of the day, relying solely on the intravenous medication for nourishment. Elena reaches out to pat her daughter's back, but seeing her frail and weak, she hesitates and withdraws her hand. When is this going to end? She wants to complain, but the words get stuck in her throat, and her nose inexplicably starts to feel sour. Wyatt, I'm going to pick up Alice. After a half-hearted struggle, Sarah, with the pain in her body gradually diminishing, falls asleep. Elena, seeing her daughter temporarily at ease, checks the time and realizes it's almost time to pick up her granddaughter from school. Mom, I'll go pick her up. I'll go. You take care of your wife. She walks a couple of steps forward, remembers something, and stops her son-in-law, who is about to push the door back to the ward. Wyatt, how have you been lately? Wyatt retracts his hand from the doorknob, turns around to respond, not busy, Mom. If you have something to do, go ahead. I'll take care of Sarah. I didn't mean that. What I meant is, she musters the courage and decides to say everything she wants to say in one go. Wyatt, I know taking care of a sick wife is very difficult, especially with so much work on your plate. But considering that Sarah has been with you for almost 20 years, could you wait until she gets better before seeking out another woman? Wyatt, I'm begging you. Sarah is pitiful. She's been through a lot since childhood. Mom. Wyatt interrupts Elena, pushes his glasses back up his nose, pauses briefly, and carefully formulates his response. Mom, I don't understand what you mean by saying this. As you said, Sarah has been with me for so long. To be honest, without her, I wouldn't have my current career. She has been my support for nearly 20 years. I wouldn't and won't look for any other woman now or in the future. Do you really not have anyone else? Wyatt responds firmly, Mom, I don't know what I did to make you have such a misunderstanding, but I really haven't done anything to hurt her. Fine, I understand. Take care of Sarah. I'm leaving, she says, turning away. The setting sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a blood-red hue across the entire corridor. Short and long streaks of red, vivid and reminiscent of colors on an oil painting, painted a scene that seemed surreal. A worried doctor, composed nurses, patients recovering from serious illnesses, and family members switching from tears to laughter, glancing hastily, it could be the last glimpse of their lives. Elena picked up her granddaughter and returned home. In the kitchen, she started cooking the porridge they would drink for dinner, and then lit incense for her husband on the living room wall. In reality, whether her husband was alive or not, she had no idea. In her heart, he was gone, and his time of death was when he disappeared. It was just an old story, a man who abandoned his family, evading debts everywhere. There was nothing more to say. However, every year around these days, she thought of him, then lit incense and burned paper money. Speaking of it, Sarah changed her surname on the anniversary of her father's death. At that time, Elena was desperate, chased by creditors, carrying her daughter, and rushed to the police station. The television turned on. When she heard the sound, she glanced up from the sofa at her granddaughter. It seemed that the little one had finished her homework and was now playing with her phone. Alleviate the pain during chemotherapy. After typing the question into the browser and pressing search, an advertising page suddenly popped up on the screen, startling her with the image of a young and fresh-faced girl. Without reading glasses, she raised her phone, bringing it close to the screen just to see the barely visible X that blended with the background. Oh, pretty sister, pretty sister. Hearing Alice's excited voice, Elena shivered unconsciously. She lifted her head from the sofa and saw an advertisement for Barbie dolls playing on the TV. Alice, is this the pretty sister you talked about? Alice turned around, pointing at the TV screen, bouncing with excitement. Grandma, that's the one I told you about, the pretty sister Dad secretly brought home. Dad didn't say, but I saw it all. He was preparing a surprise for Mom's discharge. Not only did he have the pretty sister, but there were also many colorful flowers, and they even got a new bed for their bedroom. Ah, I see. The tension in Elena's body released, and she let out a sigh, sinking back into the sofa. The bone marrow transplant surgery is scheduled for tomorrow, and the donor was found half a month ago. Sarah, who rarely recovered well, had an increased appetite recently and could now drink half a bowl of soup made from tofu and vegetables. Elena poured the remaining soup into a thermos, preparing to take it home for dinner. Since her daughter fell ill, Elena's lazy habits had changed quite a bit. She became more industrious, unable to sit still, always feeling that everything on the floor and the bed was dirty. Mom, take a break. Your constant movement is making me dizzy, Sarah said, grabbing her mother's arm and forcing her to sit down. I'm doing all this for you. Don't you know how many germs are in the hospital? Don't get infected with another illness while dealing with this one. Honestly, you're so heartless. Another round of scolding ensued. Sarah rolled her eyes, muttering, in other families, mothers and daughters get along well. Why does my mom always argue with me? So annoying. The hospital room suddenly fell silent without warning. It took Elena a while to come back to her senses. She asked softly, Sarah, do you really find your mom annoying? Sarah realized she had spoken out of turn, sat up straight, and hastily explained, Mom, that's not what I meant. I just said it without thinking. However, she couldn't stop herself and continued, these days, I've been reflecting, wondering if I didn't take good care of you when you were little. Mom, what nonsense are you thinking? Ignoring her daughter, Elena stared at the white wall. In high school, you always wanted to go to the southern part of the country for college. I was afraid you'd go too far, and if anything happened, I wouldn't be able to rush over in time. So, I didn't let you apply to schools in the South. Do you think it's because of this that you developed this illness? Sarah felt her mother was acting a bit strange and called out softly, Mom, we have a tradition that marriages should take place before 12 o'clock, or it won't be good if it's after. That day, I actually got up quite early, but I didn't expect the road to be so congested. It's not the road's fault for being congested, it's mine. I should have gotten up even earlier. It's all my fault. If I had planned better the day before, I would have definitely made it to the place of your wedding before 12. Mom, it's okay. It has nothing to do with you. We don't believe in those feudal superstitions now, we believe in rationality and science. Before you were born, your father was already deeply in debt. In the first few days of pregnancy, a doctor suggested having a checkup, but we still had debts to pay, and I thought if I could save a little, I should. So, I didn't have the checkup. Now that I think about it, if I had done the checkup and not given birth to you, you might have been born healthy in someone else's family. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I've let you down, it's my fault. Mom. Sarah tightly held her mother's hand, shaking her head repeatedly. My illness has nothing to do with you, absolutely nothing. Really? Only then did Elena come back to her senses, turned her head, looked at her daughter, and withdrew her hand from Sarah's grip. She lowered her head again. She didn't know when she had started crying, and tears had soaked the collar of her shirt, adding some wrinkles to her coat. The disinfectant in the hospital room was overpowering, and she couldn't stand it. Feeling dizzy, she supported herself to stand up from the chair, walked out of the hospital room, looked for a well-ventilated place, and enjoyed the cool breeze. The surgery has been over for 5 hours. Elena paced back and forth outside the operating room, hoping to exchange a few words with Wyatt to ease the anxiety. However, Wyatt was also restless. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the sunlit earth outside, feeling a slight relaxation in her heart. It had snowed a few days ago, probably the last snowfall of winter. Today, the temperature had risen, and the snow had melted. Calculating the days, they were on the verge of entering spring. Mom, don't be nervous. The doctor said the success rate of the surgery is very high. Wyatt approached, trying to comfort her. She turned around, about to respond, and saw the light on the operating room door go out. The doctor walked out, removed the mask, and calmly delivered the news. The surgery went smoothly. With another observation period, if everything is fine, she can be discharged. Thank you, doctor, thank you. Elena heaved a long sigh, her legs giving way as she collapsed to the ground. She refused help from those around her, propping herself against the wall, slowly standing up. Light spilled into the corridor from outside, scattering the joys and sorrows of the past few months, casting a warm glow on the people. She thought, once her daughter, who had undergone surgery, was settled, she would express her gratitude to those around her. Thank you to the dedicated doctors and nurses, thank you to her son-in-law and granddaughter who took care of her daughter, thank you to the fellow patients who provided companionship. If she could encounter the girl who paid for her on the bus, she would also express her sincere thanks. Was there anyone else to thank? No, there wasn't.